and I'm thrilled to present our next speaker, Ms. Renata Gravina, who is a researcher in Eastern European history at the Department of Political Sciences of University of La Sapienza. She collaborates as a research fellow on the legal thought of Russian immigration in France at the chair of Eastern European history at the Faculty of Political Science at La Sapienza. So we'll proceed with penetrating these Russian issues from the inside in order to understand better the context and the roots of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Ms. Gravina, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, I join in thanking you for the invitation, and I would go directly through the issue because we are running on time. I would like, first of all, to stress, as Professor Grützak and Professor Cella did, the European roots of Ukraine. You already mentioned the geographical side, so the Polish and the Habsburg roots. So I want to just to re-mention the Duchy of Lithuania and the Lublin Treaty, because they are, a good point by which understanding the main European idea that Ukraine brought in the Moscovian Empire, which was something, underlined in a negative way from the Russian side, because as you, of course, know, since 1748, the idea from the Russian side was that there was a kind of Ukrainization of Russia. So from a political and intellectual debate, there was a split between Occidentalists, Slavophiles, and Eurasists. The idea was that Ukraine was an integration of the gateway of Europe for the Occidentalists. The Slavophiles saw the Westernization as an alteration of the original Russian identity, so a kind of pseudomorphosis. And the Eurasists saw it as a national disgrace. So, in this sense, this is a real sign that Ukraine was Europe for Russians too. And this idea was already underlined by some of the exponents of the conservative Russian idea. For example, Piotr Struve, who saw the Ukrainian idea as a kind of fratricide idea, so kind of battles inside the Ruski Mir, so inside the internal conception of Russians as a whole. And but nevertheless, we saw the richness of the Ukrainian identity, as you mentioned, in a geographical side, on a religious side. So the autocephalous and non-autocephalous Orthodox Church, and on the Greek Orthodox Church. And I would also mention the cultural side, which was at first, a cultural dynamic. So we can mention, for example, Shevchenko, but then it became a political side. And I would try to a little synthesize the two main moments of this democratic and liberal tradition, which was in 1905 and 1917. So at the beginning of the first Russian Duma, at the beginning of the first October Manifesto, in which at least the cultural side and the cultural minimum of liberalized imperial idea was conceived also from the Ukrainian side. But as we all know, the most important moment was in 1917, as with the Rada, we had either from a liberal and from a socialist side, a fight for liberty. So in this way, we had the fourth universal defended by Vinichenko and by Grushevsky. This was very important. And I think that during the 90s, there was a kind of alliance between these liberal and democratic Republican movement and the other independent movement, I mean, from a post-Soviet space side. In this sense, I would also mention Mikhailo Dragomanov, because he was the person who conceived from a liberal perspective, although I mean in an imperial idea, because I mean he died in 1895, so he hadn't the possibility to experience the first and the most important Russian Revolution, in which I mean main liberties were conceived. So he was the defender of an idea of Ukrainian liberty, starting from the linguistic side, which was, I think, one of the main ideas, I mean, alive even in moments of difficulties, such as the Soviet era. So during the 70s years of the Soviet era, there was the linguistic and the cultural side, which maintained an idea of liberty, I mean, alive. And this is something who was also underlined by Oksana Pavlovska, which, for example, I mean, stressed the Расстреляне Vidroyena, so the Renaissance shot, which was experienced since the 1920. I mean, since the Bolshevik victory imposed an idea of Russian, I mean, giving power to all Russians. So the idea, I think that we can say that the European Ukrainian idea was something made alive in kind of waves, and these waves were kind of alternation between a cultural and a political way. But anyhow, this idea was I mean, was conceived as powerful as the Russians were aware of them. And this awareness was also underlined recently, because as you mentioned, in 2021, in July, Putin became like an historian in chief, something which was stressed by by many European scholars. And since that moment, he accused Ukraine of being of having made a Ukrainization of Russia, and also the idea of Ukraine as a Leninist idea of Ukraine, which remind us about the Brest-Litovsk Treaty. So in the moment by which 1918 Ukraine was made free, and I think that. So the idea of Ukraine as a kind of kidnapped Western, to remind about Kundera, is still alive, because mostly as referring to the western part of mostly of the Galician side. This idea is completely alive, and I think this is also a kind of history of which Ukraine is proud, because it is also the way by which we can do a link between current idea of freedom and Cossack idea of freedom, because the moment by which Cossack decided to free Ukraine from an uproot was an idea which reminded us of European uproots or European Renaissance and European fight for freedom as we experienced in Europe. And I would terminate by saying that we already tried to, I mean, to shift this concept into the actuality, because we, with Director Coronella, we are promoting the translation of some of Luigi Einaudi writings to demonstrate how socialist and then liberal ideas can link modern and contemporary Ukraine with actuality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Renata Gravina.